Okay, I am so excited about this conversation. Y'all, this is not your typical, this is not a webinar. Maybe we should like set some ground rules and maybe talk a little bit about what this is not. Okay.
We'll start there. This is what it is not.
Yeah, we should start there. So, this is a conversation around the necessity of authenticity for accountability. And so, we are inviting you into really an accountability session. Like, this is like your behind the scenes sneak peek
Yeah.
into an accountability partnership, but also with some conversation and hopefully some language that you can take and make a part of your professional life, whether you're a career professional or an entrepreneur. So we're just gonna kick off, Alicia, with some intros, like, and then just say, hey, oh, well, this is not. So this is not a webinar.
Nope.
This is not any of that. This is like a real talk conversation about authenticity, a word that I feel like is thrown around the internet a lot, but not a lot of people encompass. I believe it's a necessity of impactful leadership. So we're just gonna have a conversation. How's that sound to you, Alicia?
And listen, that sounds phenomenal. And I really, really want folks to remember too that this is about being honest with yourself too, about what you need, what type of support you need, then being willing to frame that conversation in a way that actually gets you what you want. Because many times, like, oh, well, my needs aren't being supported. I'm not getting this. I'm not getting that. And first of all, it's like, okay, but did you communicate that? Like one of the first things we both said, because y'all, we're going to do this for 30 days. Woo child. Every day for 30 days. Saying it out loud is scary, right? At least for me. But what we're doing is I knew I couldn't do 30 days by myself. I don't know about you, Brittany. Were you able? Were you ready to do 30 days by yourself?
No, and you know what, Alicia, like I have opted into challenges before, and I certainly have had thoughts of like, I would love to go live for 30 days. This is the first time that someone has said that to me, but I'm like, I've never done it. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give them a solid like 3-day series, or I might give them a little 5-day, throw a little theme up there, some subtopics, and we'll roll Monday through Friday, but then you'll be doing it on the weekend and follow up the next week. Wait a minute.
Exactly. For me, it is one of the hardest things about making impact is staying consistent.
Oh, absolutely.
For me. The thing is you cannot have impact if you do not have consistency. So this for me, I said, you know what? Yes, I am going to go into partnership with you because I need somebody to help me be accountable. I know I cannot do it alone. So I'm excited too to have the conversation around, hey, once you are cool and you are solidified, I mean, standing 10 toes down in who your authentic self is, then you're able to say, okay, this is what I need in order to show up in this way so that I can achieve the greatest amount or greatest level of impact that I envision myself having. So for me, that's what this conversation is around too, is how do you become super comfortable with being your authentic self and then communicating that to those who you have to work with in the world? What does it look like? How does it feel? How do you do it? Like, I feel like having the language around all of that. Listen, this is gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
All the above. All of the above. So maybe let's kick off as you're introducing yourself. Like when you hear the word authenticity, like what does that word mean to you? What comes up for you?
Ooh, so first of all, I am Alicia Reese. Hey, y'all. Hey, I like to say I am like warm tea and Hennessy. In that you never know what you will get. Sometimes you need the warm tea, you need a little soothing because I am a nurturer, just from my core, and also a little Hennessy because I can be honest. I don't like to say brutally honest because why would you want to be brutal to somebody? But I can be very open and honest. And sometimes that can be scary for folks, right? Because telling yourself the truth is one of the hardest things to tell yourself. So yes, I'm like warm tea and Hennessy. I am a transformation coach, an international speaker. I have helped to transform the lives of thousands of leaders all over the globe, from Australia to South Africa, all over the United States, and more. I am super excited to be here to just give leaders actual tools that they can use immediately. I've never understood the esoteric above my head. Say it to me plain. Tell me to where I can understand. Don't make it too deep, dark, and difficult because I'm not gonna be able to follow. But so yeah, that is who I am.
I love that. Warm tea and Hennessy. I can see that. I can see that too.
just a little bit of Hennessy every once in a while.
You never know. You got to be able to flow and flex. It's like, situational leadership depends on what the situation calls for. I love that. I love that. So my name is Brittany Cole, and you might can resonate with this, particularly if you work inside of an organization, but also if you are a woman that's listening in who has left corporate or nonprofit life for entrepreneurship. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to having leaders that are representative of the customers and communities that companies serve is not being able to retain women leaders. And one of the reasons for that is because women often feel like they have to shrink or put on a mask to go into the workplace, or pretend to be someone you're not, or take on the characteristics to be more quote unquote masculine, right? In order to move up as a leader. And one of the things that we know just from any research that you don't even have to be steeped deep in it. Women are leading the exodus out of the workforce. And so I spent 12 years in corporate at a phenomenal organization working with brilliant people at Pfizer for about 12 years, and just had this like crossroads kind of moment of like an internal calling to be more, to do more, to experience kind of this life that I kind of dreamt about, but wasn't really sure that I could attain it. So that was happening. Organizational structure, structural change was happening, which we all know is like corporate code language for layoffs. So that was happening. And then it was just this kind of, I think beyond that, I've always been entrepreneurial. I had a side hustle, like many people start out with, and just wanted to expand it. There were opportunities that I had to say no to because I had a 9-to-5. So all of that led me to take a leap of faith and start Career Thrivers. So I get to serve today in the capacity of founder and CEO of Career Thrivers. We're a leadership development firm. We work primarily with corporations, helping them to develop and retain women in the workplace, as well as professionals of color. So that's the work that I love to do. And when I think about authenticity, for me, it's about being able to show up boldly and with courage without shrinking. It's like, I feel like we all know that feeling of like being in the box, or feeling like you can only move but so far. Too far to the right, can't move too far to the left, because you might offend somebody, or the workplace might not be ready for you, or you don't know how your leader or your manager is going to respond to you. So for me, it's like being able to show up boldly, particularly operating in those areas that are your strengths, your zone of genius, and being able to do that without the second guessing a lot of times that we do, especially as women.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times that second guessing comes because you have this apprehension where but what if they don't like me? And for most women, regardless of what your background has been, what your ethnicity is, for just women in general, there is this likability factor where where many of us, and I won't generalize and say all, but where many of us feel as though, well, if they don't like me, it's going to make it harder for me. And so what I always like to do is identify the parts of your personality that are your favorite. Identify what's your favorite, what you enjoy the most. Like, I like that I'm now completely okay with my old lady Southern coming out, because I was born and raised in the South. So I have a Southern drawl sometimes that'll come out, especially once I get super comfortable, or if I drink a little too much. Either way, it's going to come out. And so being okay with that, and also figuring out, like I said, what those favorites are, and then tie your favorites into how you can make impact at work. My ability to be that like old lady Southern woman, even though I look like I'm like 22 on a good day, it allows me to be able to build friendships with people, because usually old ladies, you're like, oh yeah, come on, little old lady, come on. And so then that allows me to make more impact. Or when I was working, in business development heavy, it allowed me to build more relationships and close more deals, because I was considered unassuming. And old ladies, you kind of let them say what they want. So I can sometimes, off the cuff, sometimes say things that were just like, okay, that's the Hennessy talking type of thing. So just figure out for me, what are the favorite parts of yourself? And then take a look at, how do I take these favorite parts of me and then attach them or tie them to things that matter for the business? Then what it does, it'll support you in that you feel like, okay, I'm making actual impact here. And also, I am figuring out how to be my greatest, best self authentically, because this is a piece of me that I love anyway. Does that make sense?
Yes. No, that is so good. And it reminds me of and if you all are listening in, we see you joining us on LinkedIn. You might be watching this either live or on the replay on YouTube. But if you are joining us on LinkedIn, let us know what questions you have. We're tracking with you. We can see your questions, and we want to make sure that this is an impactful conversation for you. And certainly, too, what you would add to the conversation. So, what you were saying, Alicia, was reminding me we teach this VISA framework, VISA, and it stands for your values, your interests, your skills, and your abilities. And so oftentimes when you're thinking about like those favorite things about you, I think it's important to kind of zone in on those four areas. Like what are your, not your company's values, but what are your personal values? What are those non-negotiables for you that you kind of have as a North Star that guide your decision making, your behavior, things of that nature? What are you naturally curious about? Those are your interests, right? What are those things that you, when you have time to Google? I don't know. Like I still like magazines. I don't know if people still buy magazines or subscribe to magazines, but I still like to turn the page, not just scroll. Yeah. So, like, what are those topics that if you go into a bookstore or if you subscribe to a magazine, like what are those topics for you that interest you? Mm-hmm. Think of the S, your skills, as those competencies that you developed. So you've spent some time either in certification, in school, training, maybe learning on your own via podcast content or what have you. And then the A is for your abilities. So think of those things that you do naturally well. And so I think that's such a great tip that you shared in terms of like, what do you love the most about you, and really anchoring there. I'm curious, I have a story in my mind, several, but for you, maybe tell us about a time when maybe you felt like you had to compromise your authenticity. So maybe you feel like
absolutely.
You wasn't welcomed or whatever the feeling might have been.
Oh, yeah. So my last year in corporate, I believe it was 2014, I believe. So I think it was 2014, maybe 2013. I don't remember, because the way the time starts to just, it's kind of on speed here. But I had gotten laid off, shockingly enough, from one of the parent companies. I had gotten laid off, and they brought me back literally like 3-4 weeks later, and it was in a different department. And so I'm in the different department. There's this head. I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna get along great. We laughed, we joked, we had a great time. Then we were at this offsite, and at the offsite, in front of my new manager and all the people in the company, he calls me trash. He says, well, if you think that way, then you're a piece of trash. Now, immediately, my first, reaction, I, was born and raised impoverished. And usually when you say things like that to people, there's an immediate response, and it's not a positive one. The usual response for someone who was raised how I was raised is one that, okay, all right, cool. You want me to put your hands on? You want me to put my hands on you? But of course, we're in a professional setting. So instead, what I did is I told myself, okay, you will not be able to be yourself in this particular environment. And if you're going to survive, you're going to have to shrink and shut up. Because he battled with me back and forth. And mind you, my immediate boss, which was his friend, pulled him aside and was like, hey, yo, like, that's not cool. Like, you can't say that. Like, what are you doing? And then 2 days later, when we were back in the office, he apologized, but he apologized behind a closed door. So I'm like, okay, this is inauthentic. And so what I did, and I immediately started planning my exit strategy. When he brought me into that office and he apologized in secret, even though what he said was out loud in front of everyone, I immediately started planning my exit strategy. I was like, oh yeah, this is finished. I'll be done with this in a year. But I said, since I'm going to be here, though, I will have to shrink myself. I will not be able to bring who I really am to work. So I did not perform well in that position at all, even though I had just done it in another position and I had done exceptionally well. I did not perform there. I was always in the bottom when it came to my metrics and everything else, because from the beginning, I felt like I was shot in the foot and then told to run. And I was done with it. I planned my exit strategy. I knew I'd only be there for a year. I saved all my money so that in a year I would be able to say goodbye. So for me, I think that was a time that I was just like, yeah, nah, being who I am does not work, because And mind you, what we were disagreeing over was it was a colloquial term where he felt one term was okay because it was something that resonated with him. And I felt that another term was okay because it was the opposite of the terms. I'm like, well, if you're okay with A, you should also be okay with B. If you say apples are cool, oranges are too, even though you prefer apples. So yeah, that was an instance.
Yikes. Yeah, I was over here like, oh my gosh.
He said, called me trash in front of everybody in the organization. And I think I had been with the org at that point 1 or 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I planned my exit strategy 2 days. Once I realized, oh, so you're going to apologize in secret now, even though you offended me in public, not a problem.
Yep.
Cool.
And that is huge. It's going to take me on a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's important to say, especially for, the leaders that might be watching, and we encourage you, share this with your team, your colleague, your leader, when we're thinking about, and for us, and I'll say this first, like the way that I won't even talk about career therapist for a second, I'll talk about Brittany, the way that I process and think about the industry and the business segment of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think of it as a core competency of leadership development. So it's not this separate thing. If you're going to be an exceptional leader in 2023 and beyond, being an inclusive leader is like a non-negotiable. It's not an attachment. So in saying that, like one of the things that I feel like we preach so much, especially when this topic of allyship comes up, is that it is not allyship if you are not risking anything. You're not being an advocate for anyone, for any group of people, if it doesn't cost you something. So this whole idea of like, whether it's an apology or whether it's like, I really agree with you, or you hear a microaggression in a meeting, or a woman gets talked over in a meeting, and instead of calling it out in the meeting, you wait till the meeting is over, and then you say to them like, that was really terrible that so-and-so kept talking while you were talking. That does
nothing.
Like it does no good if you do not say it in the moment. It's almost meaningless. It's close, right? It's close to meaningless. And so I think for leaders, it's so important that like that courage that's necessary to lead other people and to be a representative of what inclusion looks like by speaking up in the moment, or just the same, right? Swallowing your ego to where if you did make a mistake that was public, you apologize in the same way. It's like, this is leadership 101, guys. Like, come on, ladies.
Yeah. And I think too, that's a part of being authentically accountable.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Because, and this is something that I tell all leaders, especially when I'm coaching them, there is nothing wrong with making a mistake. We're all still learning. We are all forever evolving, forever becoming. So to think that you are going to have reached this pinnacle of perfection is completely unfair to yourself. It is unfair to you. It is unfair to the people who you are trusted to lead. It is okay because here's the thing, when a baby is learning to walk, they fall down over and over and over and over again because they are figuring out, how do I exercise this muscle in this place, in this time? How do I do it? And we don't penalize or pop the baby because they keep falling down. We say, it's okay, get back up, you'll be all right, go ahead and try again. Same thing when you make a mistake as a leader, and even if you're not leading, let's say a whole group of people, but when you make a mistake as a leader, it is totally okay to say, you know what, hold on, I didn't like the way I just did that. I did not mean that like that. I apologize because I know that didn't feel good, and that's not how I want you to feel. My bad. It can be a my bad. That's okay. It doesn't mean to say you didn't mean what you said, because he meant it. In his heart of hearts, he meant, for him, my belief meant that I was trash. You get to have your feelings and your beliefs. You just don't get to disrespect somebody else because of them. However you feel is how you feel.
Yep.
I'm cool with that. You can feel how you want to feel. But the moment your feelings, the moment those feelings start encroaching upon someone else's safety, someone else's autonomy, then you've got to check your ego at the door, because there's no room for that in leadership.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head with, my mind goes here because my work goes here. So if you're signed on, like, is this a DEI conversation? It's not, but it is. I feel like all conversations are DEI conversations. But that's a different conversation for a different time, right? Because diversity just means different. So like it's all a DEI conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that's so critical, particularly because if I reflect back to even like our experience Q4 of 2020 and all of 2021, we had so many client partners that wanted bias training, unconscious bias, unconscious bias, unconscious bias. And it's like, listen, we'll help to educate around that, but we don't stay there because you're not trying to solve for bias. Anytime that a human is involved, bias is going to be present. So we're not trying to solve for beliefs, right? Yeah. What we're trying to solve for is behavior. Believe what you want to believe. Like whatever your politics are, whatever your upbringing was, whatever your opinions are, all of that is welcomed here. What we want to have some guardrails around is the behavior. Here's what behaviors look like. And so I feel like too many organizations spent and still spend way too much time talking about bias and I'm trying to get someone to change beliefs. We're never trying to get you to change your beliefs at Career Thrivers, ever, right? What we're trying to get you to do is identify one and then recognize the behaviors that will help you get from where you are to where you want to be. But anyway, I feel like that was necessary. But it is also linked to this conversation, Alicia, because one of the biggest misses in that body of work is accountability.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like the HR leader, the C-suite team has said, here's what we're doing. You know, the C-suite has hired a DEI person, hopefully more than one person, a team, right, to lead the work. But we all know culture is built in the middle. Mid-level leaders cultivate the culture. If you are a people leader, you are a cultivator of your company's culture, not what's on your website. And so that level of accountability is often what's missing. So you never have an opportunity to really sometimes see the work grow as fast as it could, accelerate in the way that you anticipate or the way that you might have on a DEI report. And the reason for that is because there's no accountability in the middle for the work getting done with the people who actually have the majority of the control from like a team standpoint. But I agree with you that that level of authenticity is so important to be able to really suppress your ego as a leader to say like, I don't understand, you know, I made a mistake, whatever it might be. So,
and that's okay. Like, because here's the thing that folks have to understand, whether you are a mid-level leader, whether you are in the C-suite, there is so much value in you being able to say, I missed the mark. Like today, I was having a meeting with one of my business partners, and she literally said to me, hey, what works for you, what is a natural inclination for you is an unnatural inclination for me. I need more support because I don't feel like a good teammate or a good partner, because what is natural for you is it's oblivious to me. What can we do? How can we set up some better supports so that I can better support what we're doing and what our mission is? That's not only authenticity, where she's like, you know, being like, hey, this is not who I am. I want to do the work, but this is not who I am. That accountability piece then comes in where she's like, hey, can we do this each day at this time for 15, 20 minutes so that I can have a clear understanding of what we need to do and how we need to do it so that I can better support what our goals are. That's a part of being authentic, identifying what the needs are, what the goals are, how you need to show up, and then saying, hey, help me be accountable, help come into accountability with me by assisting me in these ways. And as a leader, if let's say you cannot, like, hey, what you're asking me for, I cannot deliver it. Let me see who and how I can put you in support with so that you guys can be in support, because I don't have capacity, or this is not an area of focus for me because I'm focused here, there, and everywhere else. That's okay. Again, this is where it comes to being authentic. You get to say that something doesn't work for you. Just because somebody brought you a problem doesn't mean that you have to be responsible in solving it. What you can help them do is, hey, let me see who I can position you with to assist you in finding a solution. That's okay. But like you were saying, it's the behavior that is the issue. Feel how you want to feel, believe what you want to believe. But when you have a person who is being genuine and looking and trying their best to be their authentic self, if you see they're having issues, it's okay to have a talk with them. because that man would have gotten the most out of me, because I was so excited to get back to work, even though granted it was only for like, a couple of weeks of me being off, of me being, I think it's like I said, a month, I believe, of me not having, a role. But still, I was so excited to come back in. And that man literally would have had me at that organization another 5 to maybe 7 years. 5 to 7 years, but he cut literally 6 to 7 of those years off simply because of how he responded. Your leadership team can either be poison to your people or they can be an elixir. Do you want the elixir or do you want the poison? You get to choose. But if you know you have leaders in place who are toxic, and I don't care that they're able to deliver, that delivery or that level of delivery will be stunted simply because they keep cutting off and poisoning your best people.
So true. It's so true. And I think one of the reasons why you see it so often, particularly in sales, is, and I think this happens across, divisions, is oftentimes the best performer gets promoted to people leader. And you can be a top performer, but it does not mean you've developed the capacity to lead. Those are two different skill sets. Being the best at what you do and bringing the best out in other people to mimic that result or to surpass that result is not the same competency. And so that's why at Career Fibers, we're so focused and centered on leadership development, and not just for people with direct reports. Like, how are you thinking about your emerging leaders, those next level leaders, and looking at your talent management process so that you are actually doing the things to develop the competencies so people actually know how to say, hey, this isn't about the way that I did it, because just like your story just shared, the way that you do it might not be the way that's going to bring the best out of your team member. So you've got to know how to, I think of leadership as really being a chameleon. Like, that's what you sign up for. You sign up for, and this last thing I'll say on this topic, like, I think one of the most, I'll just call it interesting questions that is often asked in people leader interviews. And I think it's the wrong question. That's why I said interesting, to put it nicely, is what's your leadership style? And I am of the opinion that if we agree that the leader's job is to bring the best out of the people that they're leading, then the leader needs to be able to take on the style that is necessary to bring the best out of the people that they're leading. So
you gotta say that
doesn't matter, right? The way that I want to engage with people and my natural tendency and like that really doesn't matter. The question is, am I able to suppress my natural lean based on what someone else needs? And do I have the emotional intelligence to understand what they need to be able to show up for them in that way so that they perform at their highest, so that they're as productive as possible, so that the whole team rises? So like my leadership style, like transformational leadership, if you want to get theoretical and choose one, because you're in this work, but really at the end of the day, that is about like, how do I bring the best out of the person that's in front of me at the moment? And it's a tall order, leadership is a privilege. It's an honor to serve in that role, not like something that you earn because you were a good performer. So like I'm off my tangent on that, but I feel like
that's the best tangent to be on.
It's just
no, I think that's the best tangent to be on. You want to know why? It's kind of like, and whether or not you have children is irrelevant, but think of it with your siblings. And if you didn't have siblings, cool. Think of it about with your cousins. But with children, right? The way you handle one child is not the way usually you will handle another. If you have 2 children, and I do not, I only have one. But if let's say you have 2 children, one is a little bit of a rebel, like me. One is a little bit of a rebel. The other one, you tell them to sit down, they will sit down from the time you told them to the time you come back 3 hours later. They are still sitting in that spot. Those 2 children will need to be raised very, very differently, even though they are in the same household. They come from the same stock. You will have to do things differently. So it is not a concept that is just, oh, it's too much. No, it's not. Just like I'm pretty sure the way my sister and I are, she was the child that she is going to quietly defy you. She'll obey while you sitting there. Okay. You told her to sit down. All right, cool. I'm going to sit. She going to sit there for a while. She going to listen. She going to obey. She going to write the little papers or the words or whatever you told her to do. Me, Oh no, I'll be like, oh no, that doesn't work for me. Do we have other options? Can I make a suggestion? The way you would discipline her and discipline me, or rear her or rear me, different. So if you can understand how you do that in terms of different people require different things. And if, let's say, you've never dealt with children at all, relationships, the way one boyfriend is and what their needs are doesn't align with the way your next boyfriend is, or your husband or your girlfriend or whomever. You're dealing with different people. You will need to adjust how you're dealing with them because they are authentic, prayerfully. They have their own authentic needs, wants, emotions, feelings, things, the ways in which they like, their appreciation levels, all of those, or their appreciation, their different types. Figure out what that is. Come into partnership with them. As a leader, one of the things that I do anytime I'm leading a group of people, one of the first things I do is I want to meet with everybody so I can get a real good sense on who you are, what matters to you, what means something to you, what you feel you're best at. If you feel you're working in a position that doesn't really align with what you want, okay, how can I take aspects of what you're saying you want and tie that to what our goals are or what our focus is so that I'm still getting the most out of you? Yes, it takes more time. It does. Yes, it takes more intention. It does. And also what I get is a way more committed team member who is excited to go to bat for me, to produce for me, and to ensure that we hit our goals. So choose which one matters most to you.
Hands down. So as we wrap up here, if you all have any questions, if you're tuning in live, let us know in the comments. Alicia, maybe we'll leave off with this. So we've been talking about authenticity, leadership, accountability. Talk to me about, do you believe or have you heard of potential like misperceptions when it comes to authenticity, right? Because I think sometimes, particularly when we think about generational diversity, right, there are different approaches to authenticity and this idea of like what that actually means.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say maybe to people who have a very open view of what it means to be authentic in the workplace?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it also it ties in with the question that you asked earlier to realize I didn't answer. You asked me what were my thoughts on authenticity, and originally my thought on being authentic was fear. If I am authentic, I will lose something. I will not have something. Someone will take something from me because my authentic self, because once I'm on, it can be scary, or I can be too vibrant, or I can ask too many questions. So for me, authenticity originally was steeped in fear. I mean, rooted deep. I had roots growing in the fear of being my authentic self. Now, I like to think of authenticity because for some folks, they think being authentic means they have to be loud or forceful. And this isn't irrespective to any ethnicity or creed or anything like that. It literally is being my authentic self to me means I have to force it on others because they must accept. Now my thought around authenticity is authenticity is like a rooting, where you are rooted in who you are, like you said earlier, what your values are, and you leverage and utilize those to really make the most impact wherever you are. That to me is the truest form of authenticity, because then it allows you to shift, adjust, learn, be open, be intentional, and not be afraid thinking that, well, who I am doesn't align with these people. Because if and when it doesn't align, you get to pick somebody else. You just do.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I have one of my strong values is ownership, and not just in the entrepreneurial sense, but like, you own your career. You are the owner of your career development. So you get to work at a certain organization and they get to leverage your skills and strengths. And if it's no longer a great match, then you get to
pick somebody else to do it.
pick another partner, right?
Yeah.
It's a mindset shift for sure.
And what about
I would ask
you?
the question a slightly different way, maybe hone in a little bit. So for in terms of how I asked it, do you believe there's a difference between authenticity and oversharing? And if so,
Absolutely.
like, what is that fine line? Because I think sometimes people say like, "Oh, I'm just being my authentic self," and it's like, I think we're in the oversharing bucket. So, what are your thoughts around that?
So I think where, to me, that's where the whole, you feel like you have to be loud, you have to be boisterous, you have to force, you have to. And if I'm being honest, I was one of those. So I'm talking to my people, okay? Because I used to be one of you. I'm one of you. I used to overshare. And I think sometimes I still slip into there a little bit. However, what happens is you got to get really good at reading the room, because you can still be your authentic self and read the room and understand that it is not the time, the place, or the audience for certain conversations. So that's where the accountability piece comes in too, because you can't be mad, and you can, because again, you could have your feelings. Your feelings are your feelings. They're not facts, but they are yours. But it's not prudent to be mad and angry and upset with someone because you keep in the vein of, oh, I'm being authentic, and you keep bringing up situations, stories, or instances that are just, it makes no sense in this point, this place, this time. Yes, always be your authentic self. Figure out who that is, which is why I said that in the beginning. Figure out the favorite parts of yourself and then see how it aligns with the work that you are working on, because it allows you to still be, rooted in who you are, but also make impact so that you can grow. That's a thing, because there is such a thing as you're doing too much. Love you, mean it. And also, this isn't the time, the place, the season, or the space for that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why you got to have both. You got to have the authenticity, but you also have to have the accountability.
Yes.
And I think of that oftentimes as being coachable.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely believe in helping companies create a culture of coaching, because it's often the missing learning and development element for people in the middle, which is the majority of the organization, which is also the
Yeah.
most diverse area of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And
It's also usually too the most challenging to transition out of
yes,
when you're in the middle.
yes, hands
Like
down.
it's the toughest. Yeah.
Yeah, hands down. So in order to have a coach, or if you've ever been in a coaching relationship, or if you have it and you're curious about it, like, being coachable in terms of the coachee's responsibility is a non-negotiable. Like, you're working with someone that's going to help you to see around the corner, that's going to even if you're in a mentor relationship, or even with your leader, they're seeing things from a different vantage point than you are. So it's not always an attack on your authenticity when you're getting that feedback. Just like you mentioned, that maybe this isn't the time, the place, the audience, right? And so just maintaining a level of flexibility to be open to receive that feedback, but also holding the accountability of, perhaps this is an opportunity for me to be more emotionally intelligent, so that I can detect, even though I'm rooted in who I am and my identity and my authenticity, I can detect when are the right moments and who is the right audience for certain messages. So
Absolutely.
I
Before we leave, though, real quick, I know
yes,
we're gonna get on out of here, but before we leave, I want to ask you,
sure.
when have you had to be coachable because you were being your authentic self, and you kind of had to take accountability, like, maybe this wasn't the place or space for that, action, comment, phrase, discussion, conversation? Like, what did that look like? And then how did you shift moving forward?
Yeah, so I'll tell a quick story, especially for the women that are on. I hope that this helps you, and men. This may apply to you too. But I am naturally an introvert, which does not mean that I'm shy.
I've
It
been
just
telling
means that I
everyone.
process internally. I'm very thoughtful. Oftentimes, that there's always two sides of the coin, because sometimes overanalyze things. It's like, girl, it's time to move. Are you still thinking? And I don't mind being alone. It's like, so I can remember I spent the first 9 years of my corporate career in sales. It was time to transition into marketing. It was a journey, a lot of disruption in getting there. But I'd finally gotten there. I was on a fantastic marketing team in a role that was literally tailor-made for me. And I remember I was at a team meeting, and it was maybe like the second week into the role. So I've been there about 2 weeks. Second week into the role, and we're having our team meeting, and there's a gentleman on the team, and I always shout him out. His name's Gerald. He was on the team. We were on the same team, and he's like a mentor to me. Still is. Still probably more like a big brother now, but it was definitely a mentor to me when we both worked at Pfizer. And I'll never forget, we're leaving out of the team meeting. And he's like, Brittany, let me rap with you real quick. So we're, this is working in the office, and walking down the hallway, and I'm thinking, we're just gonna kind of shoot the breeze on the way back to the office, like, whatever, just got out the team meeting. And we get down the hall a little ways, and he turns and he looks at me and he's like, Brittany, you're in the room now. You're at the table, and I'm gonna need you to speak up and let people know that you're here, that you're there. And so I was like, oh wow, okay. And I can remember thinking, like, I am, taking notes. Like, I have my notebook out there.
You were ready.
I'm a sponge. I'm listening. I'm making sure. Okay, I understand what they do. I know their title. Like, here's how they contribute to the team. Okay, this person does this. Okay, here are the projects. Here's what's going on. Never said anything in the meeting, and I'm thinking, I'm processing and taking notes. And it's my second weekend, so I'm over analyzing, right? This entire scenario, and it was such a great mirror for me. That's what mentors do. Like, they hold up the mirror and help you see parts of yourself that you don't see. And he's like, you're at the table now. Like, this is where the decisions are made on this $1 billion brand, and you hold the consumer digital marketing piece of the pie. I don't care if it's your second week here. Like, there's work that you're doing, and this is your opportunity to contribute to the meeting. And so for me, what that ended up looking like practically is I said, okay, Brittany, so all of this overthinking that you're doing in your mind, whether it's self-doubt or you just wired that way, whatever it is, don't matter. I, from that day, and this is the analytical side of me, I was okay, if I'm in a meeting for 30 minutes, I need to contribute to the meeting verbally at least once.
One time, just once.
And if it's longer than that, 2 to 3 times. And so it became this game in my head to where I can remember, after being there for a little less than 2 years, like, not only obviously I would host meetings, but like, I would be a substantial contributor in meetings, because it initially started with this, like, oh, I'm processing, I'm making sure that I'm saying the right thing, I don't want to say the wrong thing, all this overthinking that we do in our heads. Like, okay, let me, measure it. Did I speak at least once? Okay, girl, you was good. So let's, to like, oh, now I'm just, this is just natural.
It's natural. Yes.
I show up.
Yes.
So yeah, that was one for me, because my natural, like, oh, I'm processing. I'm listening. I'm being a good listener. I'm taking notes. That's what I'm here to do. It's like, no.
They need to know your name. You need to add something of value
the
to
work
the
you're doing.
Yeah, a different perspective, because you have to understand the reason diverse companies do better is because you have a variety and a myriad of thoughts, ideas, different perspectives, different ways to do things. It's, more than one way to skin a cat.
Yes.
It's at least 3 ways that I can remember right now, actually 4, to count to the number 4. You get to 4. 1 + 3, 2 + 2, 4 + 0. Like, there are multiple ways to get to something. So being willing and understanding, like, hey, this is my suggestion. If they say, nah, that's not what we focused on, okay, it's okay. Perfection is not required. Effort
at all. And most of the time, you sit there and you had a thought 5 minutes into the meeting that someone says at minute 20, and everyone's like, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. And it's like, you thinking in your head, like, I had that.
I thought that. Yep.
15 minutes ago. And I was over here trying to figure out if it was the right thing to say. So
yeah.
Yes, that is so important. Well, you mentioned the challenge. Brandy said, this is me. I love that. Arian says that confidence switch helps and motivates you to interject. Yes. And on an environment that welcomes you also helps. That is so true. And that's why representation is so important. Like, he saw me and understood me. We had a relationship prior to me joining that team. We had been on other teams before. And so he was able to say something to me that likely my leader was thinking in the same room. Like, why is Brittany just sitting here not saying anything?
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm doing what I need to be doing, because I'm just 2 weeks in. Meanwhile, they're like, is she
gonna talk or not?
Yes, so that is so important. So Alicia mentioned that this is a challenge. So I'm just going to shed just a little bit of light on that for people who are maybe like, wait, tell us more before we wrap up. So we both made a commitment as business owners, as women that work with learning and development teams, with HR teams, to help companies create a culture where women can thrive, people can thrive, and we've made this commitment to share our voice, to speak up, just like what I was sharing, like to speak up, to show up. My mentor always says, like Marshawn Evans Daniels, she often says, those that show up go up. So we
Yes.
made a commitment to show up live every day
Every
for
day.
30 days.
That's Saturday and Sunday too, y'all. Whew.
Ooh-wee. So thank y'all for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Oh, and if there are any questions that you have that you specifically want us to answer, please slide in our, they don't call it on LinkedIn DMs, but slide into our DMs, private message us, or you can join the conversation and ask Live and Live in Color. Totally cool with that. But don't feel as though you can't, or, oh, this isn't for you. If you are a human, this is for you.
Yes.
So we are excited to help.
Yes, yes. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us, and we will see you all soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.